Well, what I'd like to do today is share with you some random thoughts and anecdotes that I've had about marriage in general. And I'll tell you at the outset, I'm really not here to discourage you from getting married or encourage you to get married. But there are a lot of things that have been happening recently here in the last month, well, even in the last year, that I thought would be interesting to look at. And largely this applies, of course, to those of you guys that are still single. Maybe you haven't come to the Philippines yet, but you've kind of already decided, well, when I get to the Philippines, I'm going to find a great Filipina and I'm going to get married. And again, I'm not here to discourage you from that, but I do want to share with you some observations in my own life from the last 40 years or so, along with the experiences of close friends of mine, both here and in the Philippines and the United States. So I heard from a very good friend of mine yesterday, and he sent me a link just to look at from a website that lists homes for sale. And this house, I believe it was going for $3.7 million. And I was like, well, why would he send me that? And then in his follow-up comment, he mentioned, well, this is his son's house. Now, his son is a big guy, well, tall guy, 6 foot, makes a very good amount of money. And he's the one that owns this house there in the United States for $3.7 million. He's got 4 kids with his wife, and they've been married for quite some time. But now the house is up for sale because the wife has decided that it's just not enough. It's not enough that he's a good father, a good husband. She's got this incredible house and 4 kids. She needs more. So she's going to divorce him, and that's why the house is up for sale. And I thought to myself, trying to put myself in the shoes of this guy, he did everything right. He provided abundantly, and it ended like this. Now, in the long run, he'll probably keep about 30 to 40% of what he's amassed over the years in his assets, but he's going to lose 50 to 60% in the divorce. And the usual, he'll be on partial visitation with his kids, and he'll be paying child support, the whole routine. But when all the dust settles, he'll still be a high earner. At some point, the kids will be over 18. That'll be the end of the child support. And from what's left over, he can rebuild his life and move forward. But it still sucks that this happened to a very decent guy. Now, meanwhile, I have a longtime friend of mine that I've known since high school, and he's still living in the United States, never had any plans of moving to live abroad. He did move out of California, which was a very good move. And he just celebrated here in the last month his 30th wedding anniversary. And together they raised their kids who are now adults, and he's looking now at retirement and getting his Social Security. And, life has been pretty happy for the both of them. So I look at that and I say, well, it can happen. Even my own mom and stepdad talk about beating the odds. They met on a Saturday, had a sit-down talk with my grandmother on Monday, and by Thursday they got married. And they ended up having almost 30 years together with a great marriage. In fact, that's when I grew up. I looked at them and I was like, that's the kind of marriage I want. They were happy and content with each other. They loved each other. They took care of each other. They trusted each other. They were always together, and they never got really tired of each other, but they still had their own space. The yard was 2 acres large, still is. And if they needed some time to themselves, they'd go out and do some gardening. And after an hour or two, my mom would go out there and take them a cup of coffee. In fact, every month we would go around the 2 acres and collect up all the coffee cups that were hanging on the trees every time we ran out of clean coffee cups. So they only knew each other about 5 days and had this amazing marriage. Now, granted, they got married way back in the mid-70s. Times were different then. There was no social media or any of the problems that come along with it. And then I've got another very good friend. I met him and his fiancée before they got married. They lived in Cagayan de Oro, got married, moved to the United States. It's an age gap relationship. He's older and she's younger. And here it is about 8, 9 years later, they're still together and they're doing good. She got a job there in the United States. He's working. First, they got their first home and then they sold it and got a bigger home. They're doing great with an age gap. She didn't run off and take half his stuff and cheat on him like you always hear. And like I said, they've got an age gap. So, that can work. And then there's my other buddy out in Cebu. Great guy, older. I think he's just about pushing 80 maybe. I'm not sure. Late 70s, definitely. Fantastic guy. Now, his current wife, which will probably be his last, they have a great marriage. I believe they've been married for at least 15 years, maybe longer. Together, they run 2 businesses, each of which is thriving. She does pretty much all the work. She handles and hires all the crew. She manages everything. His job every day is just kind of checking in on things and then hanging out with his buddies. Now, they're both roughly not quite the same age, but, like I said, he's already late 70s. I believe she's like maybe mid 50s. And like I said, she's very responsible, mature, handles both businesses. They're not hurting for money. Everything's been groovy. But this is his current marriage. In his earlier life, before he met her, I lost track the time he told me. It's been quite a while. But prior to marrying her, he had been married and divorced at least 9 times. I thought he said 11, or if this was the 11th marriage, but I know it was at least 9 other marriages and divorces before he met her. But as they say, all's well that ends well. And then, of course, there's my very good friend, longtime friend. Many of you know who I'm talking about. He's a major vlogger here in the Philippines. He's been here a long time. He knows the games that are played. He took his time getting married, evaluated the situation, and felt, it's time to get married, time to settle down. But it's not always about doing the right things. Sometimes things come up after the marriage, and you just find it's simply not tenable anymore. There's just no way you could compromise enough to tolerate that kind of a life. So despite having very good experience here in the Philippines, despite doing all the right things, sometimes 2 people get together and they're just not compatible after marriage. So a little after a year, as many of you may know, they parted ways on amicable terms and they're now living their own private lives. So I look at all of these just varied situations that I know firsthand, successes, failures, marriages, divorces, and I look back over my own life. Now, in my own situation, my first marriage, I was 19 years old. I had literally no clue about anything. I mean, I went through school and literally from first grade onward maintained a 3.9 to a 4.0 grade point average. But when it came to living life at 19 years old, I didn't know anything, but I thought I did. And when I decided I was going to get married, despite people, close friends older than me telling me, wait till you're 30. And I was like, that's 11 years from now. I want to get married now. I want the benefits of marriage now. So I got married, really for all the wrong reasons. Now, some good came out of it. My 3 sons, they've all grown up to be awesome, responsible people. The marriage did last for right about 10 years. But looking back at the arc of my life, it was just the first chapter of my life. And there were quite a few other chapters to come. So then I stayed single for 6 years, but not by choice. I wanted to marry a single mother because I didn't want to, and I couldn't make any more babies myself. Much of my identity was as a father. So I figured, well, I'll marry a woman that already has a kid and we'll be an instant family. I can be a dad again when I'm, because I had my kids, like most custodial arrangements are, every Wednesday and every other weekend, half the holidays, that kind of thing. So as a home life, I thought, well, I'll get remarried, which took 6 years. And again, it was actually a much better marriage. I was with a single mom, raised the daughter. We were together about 12 years, and we called it the Grand Adventure. I mean, we were just romantically, amazingly happy with each other. And I really didn't see how this could possibly end until we hit right around 2006 through 2008. We hit major financial problems. By that time, we had our main primary residence on the 1-acre home, plus we had 3 other investment properties that were just hemorrhaging money because the housing market was diving like it never had in history. Many of you probably remember that period. I had renters coming in, then they would default on the rent. And when they finally did move out, I had to spend, again, more money to clean up the place and sometimes put in new carpet and fix holes in the wall that they put in, just repairing all the damage. So all that financial stress took its toll even on the best of marriages. Plus, working separate shifts did not help. Or running a business, a catering company on the side of working full time, 40 hours a week. So it was what it was. So then I found myself divorced a second time. And this time I actually doubled the amount of time that I stayed single. More than that, I stayed single for about 13 years. A big part of that was before I even thought about living in the Philippines. And by the time I had even discovered the Philippines, I had already reached the point 2 years earlier that there was no way I was ever going to date another American woman ever again. I knew it. I knew I was done. I could mentally see myself throwing in the towel. I will never date another American woman ever again. And this was before the whole MGTOW movement. This was before me learning about the Philippines. For 2 years, I simply refused to participate in the dating scene because the women that I was allowed to date within 3 years of my age range, they themselves had gone through a divorce or two. They themselves had accrued a whole lot of debt. And they had kids that were not being disciplined, that were just out of control. So I just simply said, you know what? I'm not gonna partake. This is just one insane circus after another. So I spent 2 years just working on my business and enjoying my hobbies and, just going to the beach during the summer, just enjoying my life. And that's when I ended up meeting, as many of you may know, the Filipina that changed my whole course of history into the Philippines. And even then, we were together for 2 years in California before I made the decision to move to the Philippines. So it was 13 years or so before I then married my wife now, Filipina. Many of you have seen her channel or seen her on my channel. We were together for about 2 years. Then we got married. So we've been married now for about 3.5 years, together 5.5. And I gotta say, it's really great. There was some adjustments the first year or two. It's one thing to just sort of date. It's another thing when you're living together and it's like, oh, that annoys me when you do that. Can you stop doing that? But I always did that. Well, stop doing it. That whole kind of thing. It's like getting a roommate. It's just, there's always going to be something that you just got to adjust to. Each person has to make compromises and changes. But overall, we're at the point now where it's pretty nice. We've figured out how to do problem resolutions, how to discuss things without things escalating, differences, come to agreements. And so now, like I said, life is pretty good. I wake up every day. We have a good routine. I make my coffee and make her coffee, a latte, a little bit of cinnamon sprinkled on top. Most days I have breakfast about noon or 1. But if I have errands to run, I'll just get something at one of my favorite bistros or whatever in town, get a little bit of alone time to ride the motorbike and just kind of get my thoughts together. Meanwhile, she keeps herself busy with our 2 dogs and pretty much gets to relax and keep the house in order and watch movies at home and do karaoke and once in a while a little bit of gardening. So we have a pretty good, peaceful life. And we have plans for the future to get a home and do more traveling. But as a realist, I see, and I always have seen life like chess. In fact, I taught my 3 sons to play chess by the time they were 5 years old, because chess teaches you to look at all the possibilities, even the bad ones, even the unlikely ones, but look at all of them. Now, since 2019, I took on a Taoist approach to life, and I'm glad that I did, because it really removed probably 80% of the stress I have in life. By changing my perspective on how I look at life, how I deal with life, how I respond to life rather than react to it. And so being a realist, as awesome as life is now, you never know what's around the corner. Most expats do the math and they go, well, I'm an older guy and I'm married to a younger woman. Odds are she will outlive me. I'll pass away first. And yeah, that's what the odds are. But just like flipping a coin heads or tails, the odds don't really mean much every day on a day-to-day basis. If you really look at it, it's just as possible that that younger wife could pass away before you did. Or the marriage ends because maybe she falls in love with some other guy. That happens. Between affairs and greed, there's so many reasons why marriages end. And if we're going to be a realist, we have to look at that possibility. Doesn't mean we have to worry about it, but we do have to consider it is a possibility. It might be a low possibility, depending on your situation. But again, looking at it from a Taoist position, I say to myself, life is good, but if there was to be a major change in my life, I would not count it as catastrophic. I would accept whatever came my way. Could be cancer, could be anything. Could be the end of marriage, could be who knows what. Again, it's a big world, lots of stuff happens. But my perspective is whatever happens, I'm not going to try to make the impossible go in my favor. You have to at some point accept what's out of your control. So getting back to this whole issue of marriage and staying single or being single, for me, and again, I know people say never, but having been through 2 marriages, 2 divorces, and now a 3rd marriage, what I can say is I feel very comfortable right now in my marriage, but if that were to end for whatever reason, I just don't see myself getting married again. Now, that's not to say single people, you guys should not get married. I'm just saying that for me and my approach to life, I think 3 strikes you're out is a pretty good rule of thumb. I'm not like my buddy who got married and divorced 9 times. When I get married, it's a huge emotional investment. And frankly, I don't know that I have it in me to do it all over again. Again, people say never. You could find yourself single 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now and fall in love again. But honestly, I just don't see it. I mean, I could see myself caring for somebody and wanting to help them, but marriage? I don't know. My marriage right now is so great. The bar has been set very high. It would be difficult to find what I have now again, to be with somebody that I enjoy their company, they bring me joy, I can trust them, we enjoy life together, we have plans for our future. That's something that, yes, you can find it. And I've been lucky enough to find different women in my life that I could have had that with. But again, compatibility issues. I didn't want to raise kids and they happen to have kids. Those women are out there, especially in the Philippines. There are women who would make a great wife for a guy who's looking for that and willing to be a good husband. But me, like I said, unless there was some bolt of lightning, I make this work because if it doesn't, I just don't see going at it a fourth time. Now, again, I'm not sharing this to tell you this is the only way to look at it. I'm just sharing with you how I look at it right now. I might think differently. Who knows? Later, who knows? But again, after 40 years of experience and after many other anecdotes from people I personally know, this is how I look at it right now. And I guess all I'm really asking of you is to think about, where do you stand with it? Do you find it in yourself still, that driving desire to find a great wife, have a wonderful marriage together? If so, go for it. Find it. Find her. Find that marriage. Find it and do it. Live it. But I can understand my committed bachelor friends who say, I never wanted to get married, I never did get married, and I have no intention of getting married. I understand where they're coming from too. Because if you look at it logically, staying single is a whole lot easier than being married. It's a lot less complicated, a lot less expensive, but it does have its drawbacks. Marriage is wonderful. Well, marriage can be wonderful and fulfilling, but it also has its drawbacks. So it really comes down to, what is your preference? What do you see for yourself now and in the future?